Alright, I'm back, and I'm going to show you a few things that I've done here. If you notice, it's much cleaner on that. I'm not sure I showed this, but before it was pretty rusty right there. Now, I've also noticed here, if you look at all of this little like checks there, those are the rust divots I was talking about earlier. It's actually the name of it's called pitting, and that I'm gonna have to brush really hard and get out, because that rust that's in there will continue to eat and eat and eat until it comes through the other side and keeps on eating. So this I've just wiped down with Brasso, and then I took a sandpaper after I wiped it off. Took a sandpaper and just went across the surface here and took off the chunks, okay? And you could do this as long as you want. And all this is going to do is, it's really fine. All it's going to do is just take off that rust. And you could just keep doing this until it just keeps getting smoother and smoother. It's very smooth right now. But I want to get this stuff off, and I need to get in the pits anyways with this. So right now I can't sand until I get this rust out of the pits first. And then I also put a little bit of surfacing here. I've already got a couple spots, some more pitting right here. And there's a lot of pitting right there on that. There's a lot of pits on this. This is a very pitty looking one. A pitty looking one. And then I'll clean up this part, the frog. And I'll come back and I'll show you what's the best example of cleaning this stuff up. The threads, you want to make sure on most of the thread parts like this that you don't damage the threads itself. Otherwise, when you go to screw it in, it's going to stick, or it's going to re-thread everything and it's going to be off center. It's not going to work. So what you need to do is you need to be precise when you clean these things up. You can come through with a power tool and clean the top and the bottom, but you can't clean the threads up. So if you have a lot of rust in these threads, the only way I've ever noticed and only way I've ever seen it done is to take either your brush or steel wool and come across them very lightly, not too hard because you don't want to damage them. You just rotate through just like this, and you want to put a little bit on your brush, just like you're brushing your teeth. You want to go in there and you just want to dig it in, go kind of with the direction, and you just want to go around, kind of go around, and then grab your towel or your rag, kind of go like this, give it a nice good rub down, and actually that did pretty well. Actually, it's pretty well clean. It's still got little rust spots in there, but you can go in there and continue to try and work it. But you want to make sure with the aluminum ones you don't clean the threads, because you'll have to re-thread them. The aluminum ones do scrape it. These wires are not made for aluminum. Okay, so you may have to get some steel wool, or you may even have to take a file such as this, the triangular fine file, and go in there and file it all the way down, all the way around, until you get all of that rust out of there. Because once again, with that rust, it will eat this. And you don't want to have rust eating this part, because once it gets through and you try to twist it, it'll break, and this piece will be stuck inside of the threaded, and then you won't be able to get it out, and it's worthless. So you don't want that to break. You don't want You don't want it to rust all the way through, because you don't want that rust to get in here either, because that will damage everything. And then the trick about cleaning that stuff out, which usually isn't too dirty in there, okay? What you want to do with that is, generally you want to take this one, the round one. You just want to go in there, and you want to just kind of scrape around. And if you get rust, then you want to go to your specialty tools, which you can find these at woodworking shows, or you can find them at, you can actually go to your dentist, your local dentist, and get them, or you can just make them. Now, I got these at a woodworking show, a wood carving show. It is usually you can find them, most of the time you can find them at a dental place. But what you do is you take the curvature one and you just go in there and you scrape it, and then you check it, and if you look, there's no rust. It's pretty much just a smidgen, a tiny bit. So you just want to go in there, spin it around a little bit, take this side, which is a little bit more, I'll go in there, dig it out, and there's nothing really in there. But pretty much this part right here is pretty rusty though. So this part right here, you'll have to take the brush and you just go in there and you just twist it around a few times, kind of brush around here. It doesn't really matter which direction you go on the frog, okay? As long as this part right here is not too smooth, because you don't want it so smooth that it doesn't lock properly. Okay? You want that groove there to go in to that pole. And if it's smooth across here, then it will just slip back and forth, and it won't be worth anything. So you want to make sure that groove stays there. You want to make sure that you clean the rust out of the threads. You want to make sure that the threads on this too is clean. You want to make sure that your pitting right here, your pitting is clean, which I may have to take the tool and pick out every single one of these holes, which is tedious. But this one, I'm nearly done with this whole entire thing, and it's taken me about 20 minutes. Okay, it'll just take a little bit of cleaning up, a little bit rusting. Now the blade is going to take longer. Now that was the cleanup just for the body, the frog, and the adjustable knob. The blade's going to take a little bit longer time, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean the surface of it, I'm going to clean all the edges, I'm going to clean the back side of it, and then I'm going to clean the blade and sharpen the blade. Okay, this one right here, I showed in an earlier episode that it's got a lot of chips on it. I'll probably just replace this, but I hate to throw away good blades, good steel. So I'm going to show how to sharpen it. It's still going to have a nick though. I could grind it down, but I'm probably not going to, considering I don't have a grindstone. I do everything by hand. So I'll clean these up, and I'll come back and I'll show you what all of it looks like cleaned up. Alright? Alright, I'm back here. Now, I had to change up my sanding patterns. This one's a little bit finer because it's for your fingernails. This one's a little bit thicker. This is a 100 grit. I took this and I applied it on my workbench just like this, and I went across, as you see here, and shined the front of this a little bit better, because it had it had much more rust on it than I anticipated. The pitting is a lot worse on this planer than I expected, and really it might just be a planer for show and not necessarily for use, because of the fact that it has so much damage toward the body of it. It has a lot more pitting here by the mouth, which is Usually when you pick up a piece and you don't see that and you say, oh, I can get this home and use it, and you clean it up and it has this much pitting, you might as well just toss it, because this is not going to be worth anything. You're not going to be able to use it very often because of the fact that that pitting right there is going to catch on your wood. It's going to tear up your wood. Okay? So right now I just found out this basically is all for show. It's not even worth my time to finish anymore. So unfortunately, this right here is a prime example. Fortunately for me, it's a prime example of a bad planer. Unfortunately for me, it's not going to be useful for anything. I'll clean it up, I'll put a little wax on it just to preserve the metal for what it is now. But most likely factor I'll never use it. Although it's been sitting on my shelf for a little while, I'll probably never use it just for the fact that it has those pits, and all those pits are going to do is grind and grab the wood, so it won't be usable. So when I said earlier that pretty much every tool that you find in an antique store is still usable once you clean it up, this is a prime example of that pretty much. This is the part that you can't use. Now, I could take the blade. Once again, this blade, like I said before, it's dented up. It's not worth anything either. For the most part, this is probably worth a little bit. For another planer, the Frog 2, pretty well pitted, pretty well damaged. I might as well just put it all together, including the blade that's worthless. And it'll just be a showpiece just to have on the shelf. I don't see ever using it just because the pitting is at fault. So this is a prime example of a bad planer because of those pits. Now, if it just had pitting on the rear here and there was no pitting here, it still could be usable. You don't want a planer that has pits near the mouth though, because when you go to rub it across the wood, that pit will grab and dig into the wood, and it's just not worth anything. On the back side, I could have sanded this all the way down and been able to took off maybe a little bit off the back side and be able to still use this planer, but because of this pitting being this close, it's just not worth it. So I'll continue to clean this up, show you what it looks like with some wax on it, but for the most part, that's a good example of a bad planer. We'll go later on into a good example of a good planer. This one has pitting, one pit divot, which is on the back of the planer, but everything else seems to be smooth as pie. It doesn't look like any pitting on the lip here or the center part. There's a little pit right there. You can take it and you can angle it just right in the sunlight and you can see all the pits that's going on in here. And for the most part, I've already put a little bit of sanding on here so I could see the pitting. And I do not see any other pittings except for this one and this one, which I will dig out with my pick, my dental tool. I'll probably dig out most of this pitting here. And it's just like cleaning teeth. If you grab it and you pull it back, you will get pieces of sawdust out of there and infection. So if you're a dentist, you'll probably be really, really good at this. If you're not a dentist, like me, I'm not a dentist, and I had to learn on my own basically. But if you look at the gunk on there, I don't know if you can see that. Let me see if I can get a piece of wood here. If you look at the gunk on this piece of wood here, that is basically what I just took out of that hole. It's this right here. Let me smooth it out a little bit. So all of that just came out of that divot, and that's all rust. So what I need to do is I need to go onto the back of this planer once I disassemble it and stuff, and go in here and dig out that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill it with a little bit of of fill it up with a little bit of epoxy. Just a little bit, just to put it on a little flat surface there. And then I'm going to wax it. Okay? And I will be back with some other stuff.